Hello, everyone. Happy 2023. Welcome to Pucks and Brews. I'm your host, Mike Sparacino, alongside, pretty much as always at this point, Liam the Chillmaster Gottimer. Got my cold brew. We back. I encourage everyone to grab a drink of choice before listening to the episode. Whether you want to do it while you're listening or pause it and go get something, that's completely up to you. But, Liam, you know what episode number this is?
29, 30, 30.
Number 30 for Henrik.
There we go.
I've been looking forward to this episode for so long. So, first off, Happy New Year. How you doing, man?
Happy New Year to you as well. I'm doing well. Getting over the holidays, getting back into the swing of things. And, it's definitely a process doing that, but enjoying myself. Can't complain.
Yeah, a lot of food.
Yeah. A lot of food. That too. Um, Also saw the Devils come back on the Rangers on Saturday. That one was heartbreaking, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
Oh, we'll definitely get to that. But we started off the year pretty bad, because the Jets just suck.
Well, you know what? They had a promising season and then they raised their expectations, right, for themselves, and they were unable to meet that. It just stinks for me, Shades, that, you lose 9-6. That's a winnable game in Miami, where you don't have all your top guys. You could have held Miami back a little bit there, so that's what gets me. But it's
Yeah,
improvements I can ask for as a Jets fan. For years, it had been, 10 season loss after, they just 10 loss season, after 10 loss season. So at
yeah, and
least we didn't have.
yet another season where they couldn't stay healthy offensively. So
Well, I
it
think if
is,
Zach Wilson, I think if, yeah, they got to move on. They got to get Lamar. They got to get Derek Carr. Maybe a little Derek Carr, Devontae Adams combo. We'll see.
yeah, I'll take anything at this point. Just give me average at this point with a good offensive line, and we can make the playoffs.
I
But
agree.
yeah, so the first day of the year was disappointing as all hell. Second day of the year, we had a pretty good Winter Classic.
It was a pretty good Winter Classic, and it could have been even better too. You know that
I enjoyed the fact that the Penguins lost, so that made my day,
Me too. It's always a good day when the Penguins lose, and the Bruins keep their home regulation winning streak alive,
which is
uh,
insane.
which is absolutely insane. And also insane if the Penguins had one, maybe two more seconds on the clock, they would have tied that game, sent it to overtime. Um,
Yes.
Thoroughly entertaining from start to finish.
Yeah, now that you brought up the Bruins, they're 32 4-4. My God.
I think they're good shades. Like I said, I was touting the Bruins pretty high during our preseason predictions. Right now, they're pretty good, but they're not 32-4 good. I think they could be a first round exit in the playoffs. They could be.
It wouldn't be the first time that's happened.
Certainly wouldn't.
I mean, Tampa, too bad they ended up winning, so they avenged themselves. But
The President's Trophy jinx, Florida last
oh
year.
God, they suck too this year.
Yeah, that's
I mean, they suck too this year.
yep. They traded away their core. Got rid of Huberdeau, got rid of Uyghur, and I was just rewatching our trade reaction to um, the Matthew Tkachuk trade. And looking back these months later, I was just like, holy shit, you
Mm.
know, the Panthers really were worse for wear, and that 2025 first round pick for Florida that Calgary got, that's unprotected, said at the time that it could be something good. Now it looks even better. So one of those things.
Yeah,
Trades can be drastically different months apart.
it's funny how Florida gets the best player in the trade, and then both teams are struggling, really. But
Yeah. Me,
Florida, I mean, geez.
yeah. For me, I kind of expected Calgary to struggle a little bit. I just think there was too much loss there. And, I think Johnny Gaudreau is such a staple in that top six. Whoever you replaced him with, it was going to be, a little bit of trouble, to recreate that chemistry. And,
Yeah.
same Florida, right? You can't expect Matthew Tkachuk to just jump in alongside Alexander Barkov and be the 100-point producer that Jonathan Huberdeau was. That takes away from Kachuk's game. That takes away from Barkov's game. And now, Anthony Duclair is injured. You lose some of that depth. Doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's oh, by the way, that was the first 2 days of the year. The third day of the year, I went to another Ranger game and 2-0.
2-0.
2-0. I gotta go to more games. They might win the Stanley Cup.
Keep buying those ticket shades. Keep going.
There was a season I think I went 7-1 or 7-1-1 or something. So
You got a track record of this. Track
I
record of success.
I literally do. Dolan, give me season tickets. Anyway, that's not happening. All right, so
Um,
let's move into the thick of things. There was something that you did bring up to me yesterday when we were texting about what we were going to talk about, and you said you wanted to talk about the Los Angeles Kings and the Toronto Maple Leafs and their goaltending. Hit me.
two teams that could be a lot better if they had adequate goaltending. And for the Kings, I mean, they are putting Phoenix Copley as the priority, as the number one guy over Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson, two goaltenders that I think, Jonathan Quick, again, we talked about it with you and going to Ranger games, track record of success. Has it been, 4 or 5 years since he's been, a legit starting goaltender? Sure. But I think that me and you could have counted on, Jonathan Quick from the outsider's perspective, to get at least maybe a 907, 910 save percentage for the Kings this year, be serviceable. Cal Peterson, same thing, just has not been that way. And it really stinks because this is a Pacific Division that there are some spots to grab. Outside of spots number one, where you have Vegas, of course, but, Seattle has fallen back a little bit. Anaheim, San Jose, those are two teams that are at the bottom of the division, at the bottom of the league. So there is an opening for LA here. And I just feel like Phoenix Copley is not helping their chances. And come the trade deadline, there could be some goaltenders that I think both Toronto, and LA would be interested in. And going to the Maple Leafs, I mean, Matt Murray's been dealing with some injuries, and Ilya Samsonov, as good as he was in the early part of the season, he has significantly dropped off. And now, right as the trade deadline, continues to get closer and closer, the question that you and I, both had on previous podcasts and multiple other people who like to talk about the game, Kyle Dubas took a massive risk putting his net into two players who have not proven that they can stay on the ice during a complete season, being healthy. And they just, again, no track record of success. Samsonov had a lot of hype around him, but there's a reason why, Washington didn't give him a qualifying offer, so it's definitely a really tough thing for both teams. And it really stinks because I think if they shore up the goaltending and shore up their problems in net, they would be a lot better off for it and could make some damage as we go, towards the playoffs. But what do you think? Do you agree with me that both of these teams have goaltending issues?
So while you were talking there, I actually went and looked up Los Angeles's goalie stats, more specifically the goals against and the save percentage. And I gotta say, I was actually kind of shocked at just how low Jonathan Quick was in both of those categories. Just for some perspective right here. We all knew Cal Peterson was having a miserable season. Before he got sent down to the minors, his save percentage was at .868. Jonathan Quick's save percentage is currently at .884, while Phoenix Copley's is at .904. Goals against average, Cal Peterson was at 3.75, which, I mean, for an .868 save percentage, I honestly think that's kind of low. Just being brutally honest right there. Jonathan Quick was at 3.4 with an .884, and Phoenix Copley is at 2.52 with a .904, which, again, that's like shockingly low for a .904. But besides the point, I didn't realize Quick was having that bad of a season. So, yes, I do agree with you in that aspect with LA. And I just looked up Toronto's goaltender stats as well. Matt Murray is at surprisingly a 2.57 goals against average with a .916 save percentage. Samsonov also has a .916 save percentage with a 2.29 goals against average. Basically, all that says is that they give up slightly less goals per game when Samsonov is on the ice.
Yes.
And Eric Shalgren, I think that's how you pronounce his name, is at a 2.67 with an .898. So
Samsonov has struggled a little bit in the last couple of weeks. It's a little bit of recency bias for me. I mean, he still has good numbers, don't get me wrong. But again, do you think you need more depth there? I mean, Matt Murray has been dealing with an injury, so he's not playing consistent. Shalgren doesn't have a lot of NHL time under his books either. So I don't know. I just think it's more of a depth thing for Toronto, and I just don't know for a team that hasn't gotten out of the first round, and there is going to be massive overhaul. There has to be if they don't make it out of the first round this year again. I mean, you can't keep sitting back and just waiting for things to change and doing nothing about it. So I think this is Kyle Dubas's last chance. And do you put your faith in Samsonov and in Murray to not only perform adequately and give you numbers that you just, read off of the screen there, but also stay healthy and be ready for a potential playoff push? Because, they have some pretty good goaltenders, the last few years where they have struggled in first rounds. Goaltending hasn't necessarily been the issue. It's been goal scoring from your top players in your big moments. I would just hate for goaltending to be the reason again, even if, Matthews and Marner and Nylander showed up in the playoffs, the goaltending be the reason why they don't make it and why huge changes happens to a team that I don't really think it needs to. It needs to. Look at the Washington Capitals, right? They went and won the Stanley Cup in 2018. You look back in 2016, 2017, fans around the league wanted to give up on that entire group, So that's just where I'm at with Toronto. A lot of risk and a lot of pressure.
I'm actually glad you just said what you said, because a couple of weeks back, Steve Dangle, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So there was a clip that he put on YouTube from his podcast, and they were talking about should the Maple Leafs extend Kyle Dubas. And surprisingly, him, Jesse, and third guy's name is escaping me, Adam, were talking, and their answer was surprisingly yes. Now, granted, they were going based off of regular season success, which I don't fault them for, but you're right. They took a massive gamble on the goaltending going into the season. Who did they have as their tandem last year? They had Jack Campbell, and do you remember who their backup was?
I think it was Mrazek for the first part of the season before they dumped him off to Chicago. I think they had Hutchinson there for a little while as well. I'm trying to think who they had towards the end of the season. Might be escaping me right now.
Okay, just to not harp on it for too long. So Jack Campbell was basically the starter last year, and they got rid of him going into the season, which surprisingly was probably the right move because they're getting the better goaltending, shockingly. And I didn't see that coming, and neither did my fantasy team, but that's a side note. But you're right. There was Darcy Kemper available via trade. They didn't go out and get him. Instead, they went to get Matt Murray, a goalie who frankly has not been a number one goalie since basically Penguins won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and Samsonov, who has not proven himself as a starter. So a massive gamble that is honestly backfiring. And let's not forget that they also had Freddie Anderson, who they proceeded to give up with. This is going back like 2 to 3 years. But it's just like every gigantic move or crucial move, I should say, regarding a key position that Kyle Dubas has made somehow has backfired. Another player that comes to mind is the Nick Foligno trade. So, I mean, here's my final take on Kyle Dubas before I throw it back to you for final thoughts. If you can't win in the playoffs, if you can't win around this year, he needs to go. He's got to go.
At the end of the day, Shades, I 100% agree with you. Sports are a results-driven business. And sports, is a business. And, at the end of the day, you got to win games. You got to show up, if you can't get out of the first round, that's simply not good enough in the ownership group and the upper management for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a huge hockey market. They listen to their fans, and when the front office is not performing up to expectations, you can expect some overhaul, and I think that's going to happen. And I'm a little bit surprised that Steve Dangle, and his podcast mates predicted that Kyle Dubas would stick around. I mean, it's tough because to play devil's advocate, you just mentioned all those goaltenders, right? That Kyle Dubas dodged, and I think he dodged a couple bullets there. You mentioned that, he dodged Jack Campbell. I mean, what's Jack Campbell's save percentage right now in Edmonton? I mean, he's not the starter. I can tell you that. Stuart Skinner took over the starter's role, you know? So
My
when you look at
fantasy
all
team again is just dying on the inside.
right. When you look at all the options, the only other move that could have maybe made the Maple Leafs better up to this point of the season in regards to the goaltending is signing Darcy Kemper. But is that something you want to do either? Sign a goaltender who just won a Stanley Cup on a really, really solid defensive, two-way team in the Colorado Avalanche, to a multi-year extension and kind of get yourself cash strapped moving forward. I think it was actually a relatively smart move. It was a gamble, but given the other options available, Shades, I think it was smart, at least sitting here right now. But I will also say I'd be more comfortable with Darcy Kemper in that come the postseason than I would either Ilya Samsonov or Matt Murray. So, it's definitely a flip of the switch, but we'll see. Only time will tell. And, once the Maple Leafs get those results and we see where they're at come the postseason, and furthermore, how healthy both of their goaltenders are, that's when the picture will become more clear, in my opinion.
While you were saying that, I also looked up Jack Campbell's stats from last year and the goalies that played at least one game for the Maple Leafs last year. Jack Campbell, Michael Hutchinson, Eric Shalgren, Peter Mrazek, Joseph Woll.
Yeah.
Which none of them are starters right now. And just to put up Jack Campbell's stats, his goals against average this season has been 3.69 and his save percentage has been 878. Jesus.
Yep. So if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, who would you rather have as your starting goaltending tandem based on those options? Would they be comfortable sitting here with 5 more years of Darcy Kemper coming on the books? I don't know. I don't really know. I mean, does it stabilize the position? Sure, it does. But I think the only thing the Maple Leafs care about is winning right now, and their fans care about the same thing. So,
okay, here's an interesting one. So Matt Murray's cap hit is 4.687.5.
yeah.
Or excuse me, 4.6875. My bad. I don't know why I threw the extra decimal in there. And with the Washington Capitals, Darcy Kemper's cap hit is 5.25. Honestly, for that number, yes, Kemper is signed for 3 more years, but I would take Kemper in a heartbeat over Murray right now.
I mean, how many more years does Murray have on his?
He should be a free agent next year, so 2024. Yeah.
For me, I just have trouble giving term to goaltenders. I mean, I guess Darcy Kemper is a little bit different. I've always liked Darcy Kemper, even in Arizona. When he finally got his chance in Colorado, he definitely seized the opportunity and, of course, won the Stanley Cup. But for me, just I don't know. I'd rather go to it year to year. It's like one of those things like relief pitchers in baseball. Kind of like you never know what you're going to get. I mean, imagine if again Jack Campbell. I mean, Edmonton is probably kicking themselves for signing Jack Campbell right now, knowing that they had Stuart Skinner waiting in the minors the entire time when they were looking for their goaltender of the future. So I don't know who I'd rather have, quite frankly. Matt Murray's been really good. He has. I remember he's been a part of 2 Stanley Cup teams with the Penguins.
Jack Campbell is signed for 4 more years at a $5 million cap hit. So he's in the middle of both of those two cap wise.
Can you imagine? If he was putting up those numbers on the Maple Leafs?
They dodged the bullet. But granted, I mean, they still could have had a better starting goalie. So
correct.
They're wedged in between. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place because one, they technically did make the right decision, but there still could have been a much better decision made. So
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So, I mean, basically, all there's left to talk about is, well, the New York Rangers, as always. And there was a question that I wanted to ask you, but I'm going to save that for last because I know you wanted to bring up specifically the Rangers' defensive woes. And I wanted to bring up the overtime woes. So let's kind of talk about those two things together. Hit me with the defensive woes. Give me what you got. If you want to yell, please do so. We need more of that on the show.
I mean, shades. I mean, watching that game against the Devils, I mean, going into the third period with a 3-1 lead and, not only getting 1 point and losing that game 4-3 in overtime, it's unacceptable. And I think it's, a microcosm of a game that is appropriate to bring up at this time, right? Because it brings to light the overtime woes and the defensive woes. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I love this team, but they're behind the net defense. Their net front defense is absolutely awful. Their defense on the rush, I mean, is terrible. And when you have a fast team and a young team that employs Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, all these guys that love to jump into the play, you can't keep taking those risks. You're up 3-1. You're up 3-1. It can't happen. Was it a bad penalty, in the third period there that led to the game tying goal for the Devils? Yes, it was a poor penalty, but you shouldn't have even gotten to yourself to that spot in the first place. Protect that lead. Have a 2-goal lead with 5 minutes to go in the third period. And that way, when a bad penalty does come your way, you're able to thwart it and you still have the lead, even if you do give up a power play goal. And it really stinks because the Rangers, and Shades, I know you'll agree with me on this, they dominated 40 minutes of that game. They did. They were really good in the first two periods, especially in that second period. They were getting a ton of chances on Vanacek. So it's a tough game. The defensive woes are hurting the team. But, I like Fox. I like Lindgren. Sometimes, they overstep themselves into the play and, they don't get themselves back. Trouba is absolutely abysmal. Poor choice as captain, whatever. I can go on for days. Keandre Miller, he's a young player. He's going to have his hiccups, but he has had a lot.
I will give Keandre Miller credit, though. I mean, he has been excellent with his poke check.
Oh, yeah.
Against odd man rushes and just against rushes in general.
Yeah, he has. And again, that was somebody who was a forward, during his own very early days at the University of Wisconsin. So just goes to show you how far that he's come. And that's why when he makes mistakes, it's hard for me to really harp on him. He's still a young player. He has a ton of potential to be a number one D-man in this league. He's going to get paid a ton of money as an RFA this year. But that doesn't mean that I can't say that his pairing with Trouba, hasn't been bad. It's been really bad. And it's probably been the outlier on this team as to why they've been so poor defensively. Because when you look at that third pair, say what you want about Ben Harper, I actually think he's been pretty okay. Braden Schneider, he has his moments, but Braden Schneider, man, he's going to be a very, very good player. The Rangers have some really nice prospects on the back end, but just right now, I just think that it's not all coming together. They're too prone to too many mistakes in the defensive zone, and they need to shore up that on the rush defense and stop taking penalties at bad times, whether they're good calls or not. And now, Shades, lead me into your overtime woes because we had a lot of chances in that one.
Okay, so I was doing some research before the start of the podcast. And okay, well, I mean, I was doing a research for a little bit of a different topic, but I can just as easily look up right now. So this season alone, the Rangers are literally 1-7 in overtime. And their lone overtime win came in a shootout. I can't remember the game off the top of my head. That just goes to show you how insignificant that one win was because they're 1-7. Do you remember who it was off the top of your head?
Oh my gosh, I do remember it, but it's slipping. It'll come to me. I'll just scream it out in the podcast. Don't worry.
Okay, so
Or Panarin, I think, had a big shootout goal in that one, but I'll try.
what the hell? Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm trying to look. I was trying to look up last season alone, just the, oh dear Lord. And I still can't get this right. Jesus Christ. I'm trying to look up, like on the spot right now, the regular season of last year, just to see how many games we lost in overtime. We lost only 6 games in overtime last year, but how many did we play? That is the real question. This is This is more work than I thought it would be, not gonna lie. Okay, all losses. Here we go. So 24 losses. It's not saying how many overtime losses of those 24 losses. Of course it isn't. Okay, overtime loss. Let's try that. Okay, so it looks like 6 overtime losses, but it doesn't say how many. I love and hate NHL or stats.nhl.com sometimes. I really do. I love it, but at the same time, I sometimes hate it.
Well, Shades, I will say the one shootout win the Rangers had this season against Alexander Georgiev and the Colorado Avalanche. And
How did I not remember that off the top of my head?
That's why I was like, I remember Panarin having a big impact in that shootout. Yeah, he won it. That was
Actually, you want to know? Didn't both of our games against Colorado go to a shootout?
They did. Colorado won
right.
one, and that's when Georgiev had the big celly there at the end, looking like a whatever. Whatever.
I mean, if I was him, I probably would have did the same thing against the former team. I mean,
Yeah.
we all probably would have did it. Let's be honest. So I'm not going to judge him too much.
I'm just happy we beat him in the next meeting. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Actually, okay. So I don't know how true this is, but there was a coworker commented on one of my Facebook statuses. He said, because sometimes I'll just post on Facebook random statuses about the Rangers and Jets. So I put up about, what did I say? I'm trying to friggin' this is becoming a mess. All right, let's go. Here we go. So he said that the Rangers are some type of record. I think it was dating back to last season. They were like incredibly bad. Here we go. And okay, he said 3 wins in 20 overtimes. Wow. That is, if that's true, because I can't find last year's overtime record specifically. Although with the way this season has been going, I can honestly believe that because they're 1-7 this season. Yeah, what the hell? I mean, that's really my question. Why can't we win in overtime?
It's a very odd statistic, Shades, because I would think that that's like a little bit of a sign that I think I would pick up on, and other
Yeah,
Ranger fans would on, going back to last season, be like, man, we haven't really won a lot of overtime games. But for me, I mean,
except
I'm really
Pittsburgh in Game 7. Thank you.
yeah, I can't really, of course, outside of the playoffs, I mean, how many did they have? Well, they lost in Game 1, Pittsburgh in the playoffs.
They won Game 7.
They won Game 7. I think that's the only Game 7 they did. The only overtime game they did win.
Yeah, I think so.
The only one against the Devils was the only one they had this year. It's really weird. I mean, do you think that the players that Gerard Gallant puts out in the 3-on-3 are the right choice? I think right now it's Zibanejad, Kreider, and Fox, right? Or Zibanejad, Panarin, and Fox.
Okay, here specifically talking about the Devils game.
Yeah.
Zibanejad had a chance to win it and missed, and shockingly missed the net.
That was like the 6th time he'd missed the net too.
Oh no, it's getting pretty frustrating at this point, and he's having a pretty good season too, but it's still frustrating.
Could be better.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the coaching thing. This is sort of gonna tie into the next thing that I want to end this podcast on. So, I came across a tweet yesterday, and I'm not going to give this account a shout out because they honestly get on my nerves a lot. But it was a poll, and the question was comparing solely the first half of this season to the first half of last season. The answers available to be voted on in the poll were: do you feel better about the team than last year, worse than the team from last year, or about the same? Before I tell you the results, take a guess at which one I voted.
Probably You feel worse?
No, I actually feel better.
Okay.
I'll explain why
Explain.
in a sec. I'll explain why in a sec. But the answer to that specific percentage of the poll was shockingly low. It was 11%. Feel better. Now, right before, when I was looking up specifically the stats of the first half of last season and this season, like I said, I'm just going to run through them real quick. I'm not going to go through like every single one, but just like a lot of the main ones. So,
Okay.
first half of last season, 26, 11, and 4. 23 regular season. Okay. Yeah, actually, I'm going to go side by side here. Last season was 26, 11, and 4. This season, 41 games played. Like I said, 22, 12, and 7. So 3 more overtime losses. Regulation wins last year, 23 to this year's 19. Regulation overtime wins last year, 24 to this year's 21. 2 shootout wins last year to 1 this year. Goals for 120 last year to 133 this year. Goals against 104 last year to 111 this year. Goals for per game 2.93 last year to 3.24 this year. Goals against per game 2.54 to 2.71. Power play 23.9 to 23.7, about the same, basically. Penalty kill percentage 83.8 to 80.8. Little bit of a dip, but there's I'll get back to that. Net power play percentage 22.2 to 21.4, roughly about the same. Less than 1% is a give or take, honestly. Penalty kill percentage, net penalty kill percentage, I should say, is 86.3 to 85. Again, just over a percent, about the same. Shots per game, 28.2 to 32.6. Shots against per game, 32 last season to 29.3, so an improvement in that area. Well, both shots for and shots against. And face-off percentage, 47.7 to 48.4 this year. Yeah, 47.7 to 48.4 this year, so a 0.7% increase. Now, a lot of the stats are the same. I would share my screen right now, but you're on your phone, so that would just make things a lot more difficult for you, fading in and out. So the question is, I'm warping the question a little bit. If the playoffs started right now, would you choose the first half of last season's team or the first half of this season's team?
It's a tough one. You hit me with a tough one. Well, I mean, the stats that you just laid out, Shades, I mean, they speak for themselves, you know? And I think people's opinions could be misconstrued based on how the way the Rangers ended last season and how far they got. But you can't say that the Rangers during the first half of last year were anything close to the Rangers team that got eliminated in game 6 by the Tampa Bay Lightning. So to circle back to your question, I mean, I got to think back to last year's team. I mean, Chris Kreider was just on an absolute heater. I mean, the one stat that really surprised me the most, I mean, some of them really did, but the one that really got to me was the power play, because the power play was dominant last year, all year, and the power play has been really underwhelming this season. They've turned it around a little bit in the last 10 to 15 games. It hasn't been as poor as it was early on in the season.
Just to bring up the difference in percentages this year, the power play percentage, there is a 0.2% difference.
I would say this year's team. I would say going into the playoffs, I would take this year's team because I think that they're better defensively, and I think that they're more of a whole group. I think it's Jimmy Vesey, man. Vesey and Trocheck, those guys make the difference for me. Kreider might not have be having as good of a year or a first half as he did last season. Zibanejad, the same thing, but they're finding their roles. They're finding themselves. Artemi Panarin looks like the Panarin actually defensively as well that he was in Columbus and in Chicago. There is a really solid player there that last year I think kind of just slipped a little bit. Panarin wasn't the same Panarin he was in years previous last season, and I think he's returned back to that form. Another big factor in me considering last year's team is Igor. But again, the numbers that you laid out, they seem very close. I mean, Igor was so dominant at the beginning of last year, and again, much like the power play, it's just been a little bit different this season. It just hasn't been as crisp, hasn't been, the numbers haven't been where you want them to be, if you want your goaltender to steal games. But with all that said, everything put together and the way that this team is constructed, yes, I would say this year's first half group over last year's first half group.
Okay. Okay. Good. You chose the right answer, because there was a stat that I left out pretty well by accident, but there's only a 5-point difference from last year's team. It was 56 at the halfway point this year. This year it's 51. Now, granted, there is a 5-point difference, 3 more overtime losses, granted, but at the same time, at the beginning of the season, especially like the first roughly 25 to 30 games,
right,
Igor was not playing at the same level that he was last year, and it was very evident. And you're going to tell me that when Igor was having a very underwhelming stretch when you compare to last season, that there was only going to be a 5-point difference? That shows improvement throughout the rest of the team in a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the stats that I listed off. Power play percentage is about the same. Penalty kill. Okay, well, the penalty kill is a little bit worse, but then again, Igor just wasn't making a lot of the saves that he was making last year. Granted, he's picked it up, which is a good thing. They're getting basically 4 more shots plus per game. They're giving up basically like 3 shots less per game. So both offensively and defensively, they seem to be a little bit better. Well, I mean, they don't seem to be a little bit better. They are a little bit better. You can just tell by watching the games. Sometimes you don't need to watch the stats to know areas of improvement from a team. This year's team is blatantly obvious. Now, they've given up 7 more goals this year, but granted, goaltending was down earlier in the year. They've also scored 13 more goals, which, we were getting a lot of late goals last year, but the uptick in goal scoring has been evident, even if it's not. I was kind of surprised that there was a 13 goal difference, I will admit, because we were scoring a lot last year. It was just a lot late, and I feel like it was a lot more low scoring games. But at the same time, goals against is actually up this year, goaltending, but goals for per game, it's a 0.3 increase this year. I would take this team in a heartbeat. Now, I'm glad you said that a lot of people's answers were probably warped by the playoffs last year and how far they did go. But a lot of people seem to forget that this team was basically all Igor last year before Kopp, Vetrano, Mott. Braun is kind of insignificant in this context. But I mean, holy crap. The team turned around last year after that. Granted, did they fall back to where they were going into the playoffs last year? I would argue yes. But they're doing all of this, a lot of stat percentage increases without those guys. I would take this team in a heartbeat going into a playoff series as of right now, comparing it to last year's team of going into the playoffs right now.
Well, Shades, I mean, the one thing I'll fight you on, though, is the goals for, because you did mention that there was a 5-game difference there and only a 13-goal difference, in the stats that you provided. So I think it would be a little closer if they played the same amount of games, right? Because didn't you say it was 56 to 51 from last year to
in
this year?
points. In points.
Oh, okay, in points. Never mind. So it's the same amount of games played.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that
That
would make
that I
sense.
made sure on.
Okay, okay. And I'd also fight you in the fact, just in the goals against category, Yaroslav Halak is not Alexander Georgiev. Let's just also put that out there as well. Halak did have a little bit of a tough start to the season. I think that could influence the goals against a little bit for the first half of this season, at least. And Georgiev, as much shit as Ranger fans wanted to give him, he was one of the better backups in the league last year. And he was a big reason why that number, was where it was. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but I just think that has to do a little bit with the goals against and where they're at compared to this year and last year.
Okay. Now that you brought that up, considering there's only a 7-goal difference with, I mean, let's be honest, the goaltending in general was significantly better last year. That's kind of shocking how little of a difference this is, considering Halak's play this season and considering Shesterkin's major dip at the beginning of the season. I'm actually kind of shocked it's only 7 goals.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, well, I think Halak deserves a lot of credit because I think over this last little stretch here, I mean, he was piss poor to start the year. Don't get me wrong, but he's been really good his last few starts. So let's give Halak some credit. But I think Shesterkin is really what surprised me. Because a lot of people came for Shesterkin's head earlier on this season when he just wasn't the Vezina Trophy winning goaltender that he seemed to be last year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's an interesting number to look at. I do.
Okay, since we've gone and listed other teams' goalie stats, I might as well list Shesterkin's this season and Halak's. Why not? So Shesterkin's goals against average 2.48 so far this season compared to Halak's 2.85. And save percentage wise, Halak 896 to Shesterkin's 916. Granted, that has risen a decent amount from the beginning of the season, where it was a low 900 to start the season. He's crawling his way back, and frankly, we probably wouldn't have as many points as we do right now if his play hadn't risen, or his level of play hadn't risen, I should say. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think Shesterkin is the big reason why this group has started to turn it around. And, like I said, a 916 save percentage, compared to where he was earlier on this season. I mean, where was he, Shade, at his worst? Was he like creeping towards the 8-9, like
he may have been
there,
high 890s for a couple games there.
Yeah. Yeah. And now he looks like that guy again. And the Rangers need him to be that guy, because that's kind of the story of their team. As much as we'd like to sit here and say that they're, 6 deep defensively and, they can roll all 4 lines. Shades, I don't know about you. The Rangers live and die by Igor Shesterkin. If he is himself, you have a chance. If he is not himself and he looks like the goalie he was, in the first 20, 25 games, the playoffs are going to be tough. They are.
Well, yeah, the playoffs are always tough, but also Shesterkin's uptick in play, and they're still having these defensive woes. That is, overtime woes. Still, that is a little concerning. That is something they need to figure out come the rest of the season.
The Rangers win that game against the Devils 9 out of 10 times. I mean, in that, just solely referring to that overtime. I mean, they had so many chances. I mean, that 1-2-on-1 rush for Severson where he scored, that was pretty much the only grade A opportunity of the overtime for the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
Got to finish your chances. I don't look at Igor at all. He faced 1-2 shots in that overtime. Sometimes when you're on the other end of the ice and you're Vitek Vanacek and you're facing 6-7 shots, you're getting yourself into a groove, you're more ready for those grade A opportunities in the 3-on-3. And when you're sitting there 200 feet away and you're Igor Shesterkin and you're seeing nothing, then suddenly there's a 2-on-1, caught off guard. So that was a team loss. And, I can't blame that one on Igor. He played really well in that game.
Yeah, I will agree with you on that one. He did. It's just, I don't know, something's up with this team, and they got to figure it out, because if they keep stumbling in overtime like this going into the playoffs, it's going to be bad news.
Let me ask you one more question.
Hit
Just
me.
just curious before we end the show. What is more of a priority, in your opinion, to add to this team? A top six winger or a top four defenseman? And when I say top four defenseman, I mean like a Jacob Chikrin. And when I mean like a top six winger, like I mean like a Kane or a Tarasenko or, one of those big guys. This group, this group specifically, which piece pushes them farther? I think it's more of a question than it's ever been. I do.
That is a very solid question. Okay. I'm just going to list off some names here. So on the left side of our defense, we have Ryan Lindgren and Keandre Miller. If we add Chikrin, who plays the third pair? Hypothetically, if we add Chikrin, who gets moved down to the third pair? Or does Chikrin get moved down to the third pair? On the right side, you have Jacob Trouba, who, dear God, I hate that contract. And you have Adam Fox, who, in my opinion, is back to playing at a Norris level. Do we add some? I think it's more realistic to add someone on that side. But at the same time, you have Schneider, who, honestly, let's be honest, in a sheltered role, he's playing freaking great this season. And you have, terrible Jacob Trouba in front of the freaking net. $8 million a year. Give me a freaking break. So the question becomes, who comes out of the lineup? Because like you said earlier, Harper has actually been okay in a third pair role. He's been okay. I don't want to take him out of the lineup and put Libor Hayek or Zach Jones back in. And I have nothing against Zach Jones. It's just, we tried it. It hasn't worked. Now
it's a black hole. It is.
Yeah,
Jacob Trouba is a black hole on this defense on that right side, second pair.
Only problem is if you bring somebody in, like you just named him captain, you're not trading him yet. That's the only thing. And if you look at the top six winger position, you have Panarin, Lafreniere, and Kreider on the left side. You're not adding a top six left winger. Right wing, now that's a question because you're looking at Jimmy Vesey, Capo Caco, Vitaly Kravtsov, and whatever the hell they put out on fourth line right wing.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's the most realistic. Now, to answer your question, finally, give me a top six winger all day because ever since they traded Pavel Buchnevich, right wing, there has been a hole on at least one line ever since. Okay. And everyone who's listened to the show knows how much I hate that trade and how much I still hate that trade and how worse it is getting by the day. But the fact of the matter is they haven't solved that problem yet since they made the trade.
Mm.
They could have, in my opinion, they could have kept him. Granted, we wouldn't have one or two players that we currently do. They could have kept him, and you could argue whether or not it would be a net positive. In my opinion, it would be, because obviously I'm biased, but at the same time, they haven't addressed the situation yet. And frankly, if they would have kept him, they wouldn't need to address this because they had the solution to their problem and then traded him. And now we're stuck with Sammy Blais,
who is a fourth line winger who barely makes it into the lineup.
Let's be honest, Blais has become a waste of a roster spot, which is just sad at this point because he looked so good as a rookie when the Blues won the cup. There was promise there, and it just has not worked out in any aspect.
When you hurt your ACL like that, it's just, it's hard to return to becoming the same player. Speaking of that, Tom Wilson returned last night.
Yes, he did. And I, unfortunately, was too late in picking him up in fantasy and stashing him on my IR. I was a day too late. But your team is doing good when they're 7-5 and you don't have a goalie ranked in the top 250. So
There you go. Yeah, I'd say you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think I'm doing all right. So, yeah, to answer your question, give me Patty Kane all day over a defenseman who is barely going to make it into the lineup.
Patty Kane or Tarasenko? Would you rather have?
Give me actually.
And keep in mind, retained both at 50%. Tarasenko would be 3.25, would be a little bit over 3.5 million. Kane would be 5.5 million.
You know
Got
what?
that connection though.
Give me Patty Kane.
Kane.
And here's why. Okay, this is if it's doable via salary cap.
Right.
He has the past connection and the chemistry with Panarin. If for some reason that doesn't work, you can put him with Zibanejad. Imagine Zibanejad and Patrick Kane on a line.
I will tell you, there's no way Kane and Panarin don't work. I mean,
it will work. I'm just saying for some hypothetical reason, if it doesn't.
Well, here's what I would do, honestly, and then I gotta go to work here. But what I would
Yeah, I'm kind of keeping you. Sorry.
It's fine. Oh, I love the conversation. Trust me, I wish I didn't have to work today. I wish Panarin would be on the left, Zibanejad in the middle, Kane on the right, and just make that your first line. And then you're able to keep Kreider, VC, and Trocheck together on your third line. Your kid line becomes your second line, and then you're on a fourth line by committee. You roll into the playoffs with that and add in a top four defenseman on the on the right side. Igor playing at his best. That's the team I want to see in the playoffs. That's the team we need to see in the playoffs.
Well, we got 41 more games to enjoy for the rest of the season, and the trade deadline's a little over a month away. So we're definitely going to be coming back to this.
He's calling.
He's calling, all right. Just to before you go here, let me check Cap Friendly real quick to see how much cap space the Rangers currently have. And the answer to that question, current cap space 3.1 million, deadline cap space 7 million. I have no clue how that works, and I'm not going to try to 4D chess galaxy brain this in the moment because you got to go to work. But I mean, there's definitely some weak links on this team that we could trade for a late round pick and just cut bait a la Sammy Blay. But I mean,
right on. And $7 million in cap space at the deadline is huge. And that means that you don't necessarily, I mean, of course you'd like to, but you don't necessarily need 50% retained from Chicago, which would, subsequently drive the price up. You can get Kane at 25% retained and still make it work under the cap. Remember, he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. So isn't he? Or does he have?
No, he's unrestricted at the end.
Yeah, he's unrestricted. So, the Rangers don't have to worry about that term and, paying him that amount of money moving forward when you have to pay your kids. So
now here's a thought. If we get him at 50% retention, that way we have that extra $1.5 million to $2 million to work with to potentially add another person.
Yeah. I'll tell you exactly who I want.
Tyler Mott.
No, not Tyler Mott. I want a defenseman. I want Luke Schenn from Vancouver. I want to go and I want to bring him in the Stanley Cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2020. I think he'd be a really nice fit. I don't know if Vancouver would trade him. I mean, of course, they're in the gutter right now, but look out for Luke Schenn. I that would be a nice underrated piece to add to the blue line, I feel like, on that right side. So we'll see.
Personally, I would pass on Schenn because I think there's better options available. But
okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Anyway, you got to get to work, so I'm not even gonna bother trying to make an argument out of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that I even want to make an argument out of this. I'm just, I'm kind of tapped out at this point. So hold on. Here's a funny tweet to end the podcast. Vince Mercogliano tweeted, this was 2 hours ago. With Halak out sick, equipment manager Tim Webb is in the opposite net from Igor. I imagine the guys will have some fun with this one. And then someone commented, they don't hit the net, so I'm sure he won't have any problem. After that Devils game, that tweet is so on point.
Sad but true. Sad but true.
That tweet is so on point after how the Devils game went. There are some times I love Twitter, and it is because of tweets like that. And then there's times where I hate Twitter, where people think last year's team was so much better than this one.
Yep, that's Twitter for you.
Yeah, Twitter is a special place, which is why I can't check it every day.
Me and you both. I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so this has been Pucks and Brews, episode number 30. Even though we don't technically do this anymore, I'm doing it anyway for this one for Henrik Lundqvist. Hope everyone had a happy new year. Hope everyone enjoyed the Winter Classic. Hope everybody enjoyed the week 17 and week 18 NFL games, because I sure did. By the way, fantasy football champ right here. Let's go.
There you go. Nice. Also, I'd like to point out, praying for DeMar Hamlin. Always.
Yes,
You know.
prayers up for DeMar Hamlin. That was a scary situation, and thank God he's doing significantly better. And from the way it looks, even if he doesn't make a full 100% recovery and plays games,
yeah,
I mean, just as long as he's walking around, that's a 100% recovery in my book.
As a one, yeah, I agree with you. From from losing his heartbeat on the field, and to being revived, and now he's got the breathing tube out. He's talking to his teammates. I mean, it's just an unbelievable turn of events. Power of prayer.
It went from just scary stuff to now it's becoming heartwarming stuff, which is exactly what we all wanted to see.
Right on. Couldn't have said it better. Any better myself.
And I will end this podcast by saying, follow us on all of our social medias listed in the description box below. Hope you enjoyed a drink of choice. I got my cold brew here. If you wanted it to be alcohol, well, cheers.
Cheers.
We don't refrain from that. Or, well, I mean, we don't refrain from telling people not to drink alcohol. We encourage it because we have, the podcast is called Pucks and Brews. And yeah, I'm hoping to get to another game soon and the Rangers can go 3-0. Dolan, get me those season tickets. But yeah, Liam, have fun at work, and we will be back hopefully next week.
Thanks, Shades. Appreciate it.
Adios, everyone.